Welcome to the Marketing Millennials, the No BS Marketing Podcast. I'm Daniel Murray, and join me for unfiltered conversations with the brains behind marketing's coolest companies. The one request I tell our guests, stories or it didn't happen. Get ready to turn the up.
If I hired you tomorrow, let's say, and I gave you 10 tasks, and 2 you were amazing at, like you're Leonardo da Vinci, I can't believe how phenomenal you are, and 6 you're okay at, and then 2 you suck at. The current paradigm of employment is, I have to have a performance improvement plan for Daniel for these 2 things because he sucks at these 2 things. Just take them off of the freaking slate. Make them stop doing those. Like, what? Why? There's just that whole, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it spends its whole life thinking it's stupid. Don't make people do things they're not good at. Find the thing that they're good at and make that their job.
All right, so if you're a fan of the show, you probably know what a huge fan I am of using webinars for community building. And one of the top questions I get asked from marketers is what platforms they should use to host their webinars. That's where Wistia comes in. Wistia automatically creates a customizable registration page for every one of your webinars, so you can start generating new leads in no time. And when it's time to go live, Wistia gives you total control. You can bring panelists on and off stage with a click of a button and keep your audience engaged with Wistia's live chat, polls, and Q&A. Plus, performance tracking is a total breeze thanks to Wistia's easy sync with HubSpot, Adobe Marketo Engage, and Pardot. To make an awesome webinar today, visit wistia.com/live. That's wistia.com/live.
What's up? Welcome back for another episode of the Marketing Millennials. And I have a returning guest, but this time we're not chatting SEO. We're chatting something different. And we'll get into that in a second. But Kasim, could you tell me a little bit, tell everybody who didn't listen to the previous episode, how you got into marketing, your backstory, and then we can talk about hiring effectively.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I like to say I'm the world's greatest failure. I failed at literally everything, some things twice. And that led me to marketing, probably because marketing is failing forward, and my extreme comfort level with failure putting me in a position to where I didn't mind falling off and trying again and falling off and trying again. So I've been a marketer for 20 years, which feels weird to say. It makes me feel so old, just to have done something for 20 years. I feel like an old grizzled veteran, like I'm the old guy on the boat going out to hunt sharks. Telling you my battle-torn stories. And I'm still a marketer at heart, although I sold my marketing agency 2 years ago. And so I'm running around now trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
And one thing you said before the call, the number one question you got from your previous agency is, how did you hire such great people? How did you hire 100 people that are great? So you want to get into what makes a great hire, and then we could talk about how to hire effectively.
Yeah. So I sold my agency to a SoftBank-backed MarTech company that was buying agencies. They've gone on an acquisition tear. I think they've bought a dozen agencies by now. And my agency stood out in 2 ways. First is we had higher margins than any agency they'd seen. I sold at 40% margins. And we'd been at 40% for about 2.5 years. Most agencies aim at 15%. That's the high water mark. And we got to 40 because I was able to find really amazing talent internationally. And I did that before a lot of people did. I know it's becoming a little bit more popular, but at the time it was, most people were using international talent for grunt work. I was using it for core processes. And international talent's not just less expensive, but in a lot of ways, I think more effective. And I hope I can explain myself here in a moment as to why I would say that. I'm not trying to cause any problems or get anybody mad at me. So that was the first thing that really, I think, set us apart. And then the second thing is the people that I had were massively ascendable. So like my first executive assistant, for example, became my director of social media. My second executive assistant became my director of automations. My third executive assistant became our CTO. When I did my exit, did the entire due diligence process. If anybody's ever been through an exit, you know how intrusive due diligence is. It's insane. And I delegated literally all of it. And I had all of these folks that were just stellar. And so that was the question during due diligence, was like, where do you find this talent? And my new soapbox is, talent like that isn't just easy to find. It's so readily accessible. I feel like we're all just sitting here tripping over diamonds. Like, all I'm hearing other entrepreneurs say is, it's so hard to find good help these days. And if you want something done, do it yourself, and blah, blah. And like, just this kind of tired, very sad narrative as to how we relate to human capital. And my experience has been the exact opposite. The key is knowing how to find it. And it's not impossibly hard, but everybody right now today, everybody's doing hiring completely wrong. The way I see people hiring right now is, imagine people are trying to buy cars, right? So like the process for buying a car is, first of all, you don't take what it is that you need into consideration when you go to buy the car. You go to the car lot and you believe everything that the salesperson tells you, and then you just buy whatever car they tell you to buy. That's how people currently hire. They put up a job posting. They let the person apply for a job. They interview the person. They believe every word that comes out of their mouth, because what other option do you possibly have? And then you hire them, crossing your fingers. And if you needed a pickup truck to move a bunch of whatever, because you're a construction worker and you bought yourself a minivan, you don't know that until you get out onto the field and realize, like, oh, this minivan's not a pickup truck. And I know it sounds stupid, but it's not. It's really not that big a stretch. The current model of post a job description, conduct interviews, hire the best person, maybe you do a personality quiz. It's like buying a car without even test driving the car. The key to hiring is what I call fly traps. And we want to define what it is that we need out of this person for this particular role. So what does the role require? And then you start to instill those fly traps on the front end. And your job, your goal as a hiring entity, whoever you are, the managing director, the business owner, the entrepreneur, the founder, isn't to do interviews. Like, the interview is superfluous. The interview should be conducted at the very end, only after you've gotten down to whoever is going to work for this role. And then you get to say, like, well, who do I get along with the best? Who's the best personality fit? Can I stand their face and their voice? But at the moment, interviews are being used as the primary deciding factor. And I don't think interviews should factor in at all, because the whole world's made interviewing a science. People are really good at that whole process. What people aren't necessarily as good at is the work. And so if you can make the interview process, if you can actually make it the work and show that somebody who comes through this interview process can conduct themselves in a way that would be functional for you, well, surprise, surprise, you end up with really phenomenal people. And I can talk about some of the fly traps that I use in my hiring process if you want to, but that's the core thesis, is there's more than enough talent out there. And especially if you're willing to go internationally, that's the other thing. And I know I'm going to get yelled at by some folks who are like, oh, you're stealing American jobs, but I don't think that's true. Because when you're, if you're a North American, I realize we have an international audience here, so forgive me for talking about, just from my personal context. But if you're a North American company, you can't compete for the labor the way, like, I can't compete against Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, even if I could begin to approach what they're offering from a salary and benefits perspective, which I never could. I can't offer what they offer from a growth opportunity, cachet, just the story that you get to tell in your resume perspective. There's no way. So the talent pool it's way easier to be an entrepreneur especially in this country, I think, God bless where it is that we happen to have landed geographically. We have social safety nets. We have the availability and accessibility of things like LLCs and, seed capital investments, the education, just the ethos, just the personality of, our culture allows for entrepreneurship in a way that a lot of people don't have access to. So you take off the table everybody that's going to go work for a major corporation. And then you take off the table everybody that can make more money working for themselves. And what you're left with is, it's a diluted, at best, let's say, a diluted pool of help. And so everybody who's saying things like, oh, it's so hard to find good help, or if you want things done, do it yourself, it's because in one way, they're drawing from a very diluted pool. When you go international and you hire from emerging nations, you become the belle of the ball. The same way somebody who's, born here in the States really wants to work for the Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook of the world, people in emerging nations just want to work for an American company or a Canadian company or a Western company. Like being able to do that is huge. Getting paid in the US dollar is massive. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why. And I can get super libertarian on you real quick and talk about like how vile the petrodollar is and how we're suppressing the whole world's economies. And it is what it is. There's nothing we're going to be able to do about it here on this call. So we just accept the practical reality that we have buying power that's greater than anybody else's buying power, and paying people in the US dollar frees them up in ways that can't exist in their local currency. And when you hire internationally, you now have access to like triple PhD C-level talent pools at a fraction of what you'd pay, a minimum wage laborer here in the States. And if you can position yourself to benefit from that talent and allow that talent to benefit from you, because this can't be predatory or it doesn't work. Like the people that I hired, I paid 3 to 5 times what they'd make domestically. Imagine making 3 to 5 times what your buddies are making. Like it's life-changing. It becomes this symbiotic win-win where, dude, I'm the dumbest person that's ever worked for me. And that's where you want to be. Like if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself like, oh, if you want something done, do it yourself. Here's the problem is work flows to the competent. That's a fact. It might as well be a law of physics. Work flows to the most competent party. If you're the most competent person in your organization, all the work's going to come to you ultimately. So your goal, the key is to go find people that are smarter and more competent than you, and work will begin flowing to them and away from you. So you should be pretty mad. Anybody who gets to know me gets pretty pissy at the fact that, dude, I've had 2 exits, one for 8 figures. I built 5, 7, and 8 figure businesses. I'm not smarter than you, Mr. or Mrs. Listener. I'm probably quite a bit dumber. I cracked the code on one level of analysis. I just figured out how to get people smarter than me to work for me. And then work flows to them. So if your thesis up into this point is I need to be the smartest person, the sharpest tool in the shed, you're playing the wrong game. You want to stack your toolbox with sharper tools. And if you're threatened by or intimidated by people that are smarter than you and having those people work for you, I can tell you that it's super intimidating in the very beginning. And then it's so liberating. Dude, my favorite words to utter are, I don't know. Hey, Kasim, where do we put these? I don't know. Hey, do you know how to optimize? I have no idea. Hey, what am I supposed to do? I don't know. Go ask Yvonne, ask John, ask Leandra, ask, this myriad of people that work for me, because I do not know. And it feels great, because the minute I know, I get sucked into the weeds. The minute I know where to file the report, how to optimize the campaign, how to do this thing, I'm like, I know how to do one thing: find really smart people. And it's not hard. It's just, it's a discipline. But once you learn the discipline, now you're set to scale in ways that other businesses just can't scale.
Big on, as everybody could see, on hiring internationally, hiring the best talent. Could you go break down how to do this? Like, what am I supposed to be looking for? What should I be thinking as let's say, a head of marketing at a big company, or head of marketing at a small company? Actually, it's probably better at a small company, but what should I be thinking about? How do I even get started doing this process?
It's a great question. And the first thing I'll say is you have to set yourself up for success. You need to hire for one job at a time. A big mistake that I see people make, especially small business owners, is they get greedy. And I think they get a little scared too. They're like, okay, if I'm going to spend the money it takes to hire an employee, I need them to be able to. And then their job descriptions read like some magic fairy dust unicorn of a superhero. Like, well, I need a graphic designer and a software engineer and someone who can do a little bit of content and customer service and automation. And they have to know these. And it's like, who in the world can do that? And I know that there are people that are capable of that, technically speaking. But first of all, generally, they're entrepreneurs. They're small business owners. They're wearing a lot of hats. Hire for a job. And if you don't have enough work to support a full-time person, hire part-time. But if you need a graphic designer, hire a graphic designer. Now, can your graphic designer end up probably building landing pages or, tweaking? Who knows what kind of extension opportunities are available? Absolutely. But in the beginning, get myopic in your scope, because you're going to find what you're looking for. And if you go out looking for a jack of all trades type people tend to be really tough employees. And they tend to be tough employees for a bunch of reasons. And we can dig into that if you want to. But the way to set yourself up for success is hire one role. So if you need a client manager, hire a client manager, and then that's it. That's all you're asking of that person. If you need a designer, if you need a, automations expert, even that, like if we get too deep into the weeds, I hear people say now, most recently, one of the roles people come to me for a lot is, I need somebody good at high level. And it's like, really? What about high level? The miracle software that does quite literally everything, because high level can do a lot, right? It can do funnel building, it's a PhD skill unto itself. It can do automations, again, a PhD skill unto itself. It can do social media scheduling. It can do website builds. It can do, email marketing, social listening, call rating. So we have dozens of potential job descriptions inside of that one job description. Get really clear on what you want. Once you're clear on what you want, make sure you're pointing your muzzle in the right place. I see a lot of people going to the Philippines, and the Philippines was great 2 years ago, but it's run dry. The Philippines is a small country. And now Google's there, Microsoft's there, Wells Fargo's there, GoDaddy just went there, outsourced all their customer service, Walmart's there. So you have this small country that's famous now for its labor pool that's being tapped out. And if you hear entrepreneurs saying, I'm not getting quite as much out of the Philippines as I used to, that's why. There's all these great big companies with infrastructure that pay more and have benefits. And it's the same issue of brain drain that we deal with elsewhere. So make sure you're going to the right locale. Make sure that locale has the ability to support what it is you're looking for.
I love hosting webinars. Seriously, they're one of the best marketing tools to take advantage of. Level up your marketing game with Wistia's all-in-one webinar platform. Whether you've got tons of experience hosting webinars or none at all, Wistia makes it easy to create, host, market, and analyze your webinars. It's seriously foolproof. Go to wistia.com/live to start generating and nurturing leads with webinars. That's wistia.com/live. One thing I want to get your take on it, because you obviously had a marketing agency and you hired from all different countries from the marketing agency. So let's put you in the shoes as like a CMO of like a small company, like a one-person marketing team. What are your steps to go and say, like, I know the first step would be like find that role you said first, but what are your steps to like scaling that team efficiently so you can start delegating, and how should you start delegating? Because most people on this team and most marketers I know are these one-person marketing team, like you said, that have to be unicorns because they don't have the budget to hire another person at 80, 90, 100K in the US. So what advice would you give to like a one-person marketing team today?
The first role you should hire for is an executive assistant. Even if you're not a one-person band, let's say you're a 3-person band or a 5-person band, all of you are doing work you shouldn't be doing right now. So if you're a marketing director, you're worth 150 grand a year, probably more, but let's say 150, just use round numbers depending on where you are. And I bet we could probably isolate about 50% of your work is beneath your pay grade. Things like inbox management, calendar management, scheduling, updates, research. There's so much beneath your pay grade that everybody in the professional world just has to do because it exists and it's work that needs to be done. And there aren't systems set up for delegating that work. And so you take your $150,000 a year employee, then you still make them do horseshit work. Like, dude, managing the fact that people spend on average about 3 to 4 hours in their inbox a day is insane. That's insane. And that number is true when you factor in things like not just your email, but all social inboxes, Slack, Messenger, WhatsApp, Telegram, right? Like the amount of time we spend just managing communication is nuts. If you had an employee who just did that, even if you might think to yourself, and this is where a lot of people go wrong. They think, well, I can do that job. It takes me an hour a day, let's say, or 2 hours a day. And if I outsourced it, it would take that person 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day because they don't know what I know. Okay. That person costs $2,000 a month or $2,500 a month, right? You are worth 15 grand a month. So the arithmetic works from an arbitrage perspective, even if it takes them 4 or 5 times the amount of time it would take you to get that job done. So I think everybody should have an executive assistant right out of the gate. And the cool thing about executive assistants is it helps you identify where their talent lies before you know. So in the very beginning, executive assistant, the job description is pretty straightforward. Inbox management, calendar management, communication, research, etc. But it also gives you the chance to start to see like where this person's really good. My first EA became my director of social. She was just so good with my social stuff. She was amazing. Her name's Ari. I loved her to death. My second EA became my director of automations because the stuff I tasked her with socially and, around some of the other tasks, she wasn't quite as good at, but automations, man, she just got. My third EA became our CTO and is now my business partner. He's brilliant. Yvonne. He's one of the smartest people I've ever worked with in my entire life. Hiring an assistant puts you in a position to ascend somebody based off of where their superpowers are. And then you go get another one. And then you go get another one. So if you don't know what to hire for an assistant. They make you more efficient and they give you the chance to see where they're going to be a best fit in your company. I also think all of your executive staff should have an assistant. If you're a business owner, why are you paying people six figures knowing that 20 to 30% of their day is spent doing stuff that should be outsourced or should be delegated to somebody else? So if you really want to lift the efficacy of your organization, give your executive staff's assistants to delegate the grunt work to. Why are we asking them to do things that are just massively beneath their pay grade?
I'm just going with arguments that I've heard in the past for this. Is what about like safety issues or confidentiality issues or privacy things that happen in my inbox? What do you say to people who have that?
Very valid concerns. There's no way to explain that away. It's 100% valid. That's why, in a couple of notes that you want to take is I wouldn't be too stupid. Like I'm not going to hand somebody the keys to the kingdom the first day on the job. So what's nice is there are tools available that allow for massive risk mitigation. The first one, and I think the most important, is you want to make sure that they are inside of your digital ecosystem. So I like Google Apps the best. It's my preference. And if I were to hire you right now today, you would get Daniel at 3xfreedom.com or Daniel at ParetoTalent.com or whatever business I own that I happen to hire you for. And now everything that happens, everything that I send you, everything that you create, every Google Drive, every Google Doc, every whatever lands inside of this umbrella that I own. And then when I delegate my inbox to you, I don't give you username and password to my inbox. I delegate access via Google's delegated suite. And so the minute I want to turn it off, I turn it off. The minute I want to take your password away and I get to keep Daniel at ParetoTalent.com, that's mine now. I own it. And then I can delegate access using something like LastPass, and you can't even see my passwords. It's really cool. So if I give you access to something inside of LastPass, you get to log into it. LastPass will autofill the username and password, but you don't actually get to see the password. So you can't keep that. And anytime I want to take it away from you, I take it away. And I can choose what to delegate and what not to delegate. So it's not a problem. But it's not insurmountable. As long as we're thoughtful about it, it shouldn't stop you from delegating. And I have a personal email inbox, so my EA is not in. And then I have my company inbox, and she's in 95% of my emails. That's the other piece of it too, is you have to think, what would the benefit to this person be? If my EA is in Argentina, she's brilliant. Her name's Josefina. She's a child psychologist by trade. But because she lives in Argentina, she can't make enough money as a child psychologist to really live comfortably. So she works for me in the day, and then I help her fulfill her dream to help children. Phenomenal symbiotic relationship. She's amazing for me. She, really takes care of everything on my behalf. Why would she compromise getting paid 4 times what she could make domestically? The juice would have to be worth the squeeze. So there's a practical safety parameter, which is if you're treating somebody really well and you're paying them really well, there would need to be a really good get on the other end for them to go do those types of things. Number one, you build up trust with somebody over time. And then number two, there are 2-factor authentication, password protection, delegated access type security factors that you can put into place to help make sure that you mitigate that risk. Is it still a risk? Sure. But dude, I've been hiring internationally for 20 years. And it's a risk.
It's a risk in
domestically too. Yeah, it's a risk everywhere you go. And there's, here's the other thing too. It's funny that you brought that up. The only time I've ever really been screwed, I had somebody stealing contact lists. I own the highest performing real estate investment campaign on the planet. for about 7 years. And somebody stole our motivated buyer list. And the person who stole it was here. They were domestic. They were in Phoenix. So, like you said, it's a risk no matter where you go. But it's a risk that can be mitigated.
One thing I wanted to ask you, because I think this is like a mindset thing, and you're really good with changing people's mindsets on these type of things, is the thing I see on, let's say, X, or people talking about hiring abroad, is when people say, hey, I pay this great executive assistant $1,500 a month, and people in the US think, oh my goodness, you're like paying them pennies.
Slave wages.
Like basically terrible wages. And I know in their country they're making 5x more, but how do you get people to get over that mindset of like, hey, I'm like using people, or I'm doing something kind of unethical in their heads?
Yeah, dude, it's weird. That paradigm's always kind of shocked me. I did a podcast interview with Bigger Than Rich. Shout out to those guys, by the way, Abramowitz and Biggs, really phenomenal entrepreneurs. They've got an EA staffing agency too. And I did this podcast interview with them, and I was talking about like how amazing the resources are internationally and how cheap they are. And the meanest things that have ever been said about me online came off of that interview, especially because they started to cut them up and they were kind of out of context. And people were like, you're a modern day slaver. You're taking advantage of, poor people in countries, and like very, very, just angry at the approach. And the reason I don't understand it is because it's like, look, they don't have the opportunity to earn anymore domestically. Not only am I paying them more, but I'm paying them multiples more. So it's not like they're making 400 and I'm paying them 500. They're making 400 and I'm paying them 1,200. And so I think the paradigm shift just needs to be comparative.
I think one other question I have for you is, marketing has really specialized specific roles. So how does one find those? I know you said EA first is the best way to but what if I need someone who's like SEO, or need someone?
Well, EA is the best place to start if you don't know what you need, or if you're still small and you do need that Swiss Army knife. Don't try to hire the Swiss Army knife. Hire somebody to take the work off of your plate so you can be the Swiss Army knife. If you know what you need, I need a media buyer. I need the best Google Ads person in the world. I need somebody who really understands analytics. I need a phenomenal video editor, those types of things. The more specific you can get, the better your job description. And what I like to do is in my job descriptions, I outline very specifically what it is that I'm looking for. And I include what I call fly traps. And so the beginning of every job description says, to apply, send me an email with the subject line that says, I actually read the instructions. Because if you're going to pay 3 to 5 times what they can make domestically, you're going to get thousands more applications than you've ever been used to. And that becomes a problem. It's not a good thing. It's a bad thing, because you have all these applications to sift through. And so you want to put yourself in a position to where they filter themselves. And so when people apply, I send them to a very specific hiring inbox for that role. And the subject line has to read, I actually read the instructions. If it doesn't, they get filtered out. And I don't do that. My EA does. And then when she opens up the applications, they actually have to have read the instructions. And I include little fly traps too, like send me your resume in a PDF format with this naming convention. And I do that because I want them to just stop. Usually when people are applying for a job, they're applying for every job that comes across the list, and they're just hitting, forward, paste. Now they have to stop. They have to rename the document. They have to change it into PDF. It's not already PDF. And they have to follow instructions. If you're going to be working remotely for me and you can't follow basic instructions, I don't want to work with you. I have them answer some questions. If you're an animal, kind of animal would you be and why? Because I want to see that they can be mildly creative. I have a quote that I really love by Khalil Gibran that says, work is love made visible. So I ask them what that quote might mean to them, because I want to know how work is contextualized in their mind. And I'm not looking for the lip service. Some people I've heard, one of the best responses I ever got actually was out of Julianne, who used to be my EA, now my director of automations. And she didn't view work in a flattering light. Work was the thing that powered. She's a professional bodybuilder. She's a scuba diver, like on a major level. She goes way deeper than most people are capable of going. Like she has all these really awesome passions. And for her, work was the thing that powered those things. I loved that. I loved hearing it. But if they don't respond to my fly traps, then they get filtered out. And I do, there's so many flat traps, dude. It's not, I'm writing a book on this right now, Daniel. I'll be publishing it soon. My favorite one, though, is before I'll ever do an interview with somebody, I have them do a trial project. So let's say you jumped through all my hoops and you've actually answered all the questions and you did so well. I send you an email saying, hey, interviews don't tell us anything. I've been an employer long enough to know that. Let me just pay you to do a job. I'll pay you $20 to do 2 hours worth of work, which in most international markets is great. $20, 2 hours, done. And then when they say, I say, send me, if you agree, send me your PayPal info. They send me their PayPal info. I send them the $20 and I don't send them the project. And I usually do this for about 10 people per role. I've narrowed it down to, okay, there's 10 people that I think could be good fits based off of all their responses. So I spend $200. Half of those people never follow up. So now I've spent $20 to find out whether or not you're honest, integrous, and can actually follow up on something. And every now and then I'll get an email months later saying, hey, I forgot, but you sent me $20 and I never did the thing for you. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want you to be my employee, because if you forget that, you're going to forget a whole lot more. Mm-hmm. So the few people that do follow up saying, where's the job? I send them the trial project. And once they've done and I'll do fly traps in the trial project too. My favorite is I'll send them a username and password for something like, hey, you have to log into this high level account and create this thing, or whatever the role dictates is what the trial project is. But I send them the wrong password. And so I'll say, hey, Daniel, here's the project. You need to log into this account, do this thing. Do me a favor, based on what I've described, tell me when I can expect this. And let's say I send this to you on a Monday and you say you can expect it by Friday. Well, if I get a frantic email from you Thursday night saying, hey, the password you sent me doesn't work, now I know you're a procrastinator. And if we're working remotely together, that's not going to work for me. So little things like that, when I get to the end of it, the people that have actually jumped through all my fly traps and have delivered an end result that I like, it's not uncommon for me to just hire everybody. You know, if I'm hiring for one role, especially when I was growing really fast, I grew an agency to, we had $100 million in ad spend under management. So I'd be looking for, one media buyer, get 3 that were phenomenal, did the trial project great, follow the instructions. And I was like, hire them all, because we're definitely going to need those folks. But that's the way to do it, is to get ultra specific and then put them in a position to shine. And when you're paying as much as I pay, everybody applies. So you really need strong filtering mechanisms.
Yeah, that's great. And last question I have for you is, what is I usually ask a marketing hill, but I will ask what is a hiring hill you would die on?
Don't make people do things they're not good at. So what every employer in the world does, and I don't know why I did it too. I don't know why we all do it. If I hired you tomorrow, let's say, and I gave you 10 tasks, and 2 you were amazing at, like you're Leonardo da Vinci, I can't believe how phenomenal you are, and 6 you're okay at, and then 2 you suck at. The current paradigm of employment is, I have to have a performance improvement plan for Daniel for these 2 things because he sucks at these 2 things. Just take them off of the freaking slate. Make them stop doing why? This is that whole, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it spends its whole life thinking it's stupid. I had the top Google Ads guy in the world working for me, John Moran. There's nobody better in the world of Google Ads, truly, period, full stop. John cannot follow processes. He can't. He's incapable of doing it. So I could either sit there and beat my head against the wall trying to figure out how to get John to check off the little tasks in ClickUp. And if I did that, I would have lost the best Google Ads guy in the world. Or I could do what I did, which is hire somebody to follow John around and complete those tasks so my automations could continue forward. So don't make people do things they're not good at. Find the thing that they're good at and make that their job.
I love that. I think even for me as a marketer, I always have been like the creative idea can get stuff done, but I don't do it in the way that every business might like to do it. And that's probably why I became an entrepreneur or like a self-marketer at the end of the day. But it hurt me because I spend a lot more time trying to put everything in the organizing way that my company wanted to do, where I could have spent most of that time making the company 2x, 3x better than it was because I was good at my job. But I wasn't good at the one aspect of my job, was like staying completely organized like they want me to. Mm-hmm. My mind doesn't work like that. It just works kind of organized chaos. But I know, like, when I was on a 1-person marketing team, the organized chaos works. When you're on a 15 marketing person team, the organized chaos didn't work. But nobody ever said to me like, hey, do you want someone to help you do that? It was more like, figure it out, which is like the classic statement. But then it makes your life so much worse as an employee because you have to keep figuring it out and start hating. Because once you keep more and more stuff you do, more and more stuff you have to input into an organization stuff.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's a great role for an EA. If you've got a phenomenal marketer who's just, and dude, all creatives are like that. All creative types, as a cliche and an archetype, they're messy because they're creative, right? Like it's a feature, it's not a bug. And so instead of making them try to live inside of the engineer's mindset, hire somebody who helps them do that, who bridges that gap.
Yeah, the best thing I did was we obviously didn't do what you did, which probably would have helped me get 10 more people on my team, but was hire a process person on my team, and that 10x'd our team because I hired someone who was just really good at process and organization and project management, and it 10x'd the team. But that's a great way to think about it, is like what you just said about don't make people do what they're not good at. I think that's a quote for the day. Lastly, where can people find what you're doing or find how to hire the next best hire?
Yeah, you can so I've got a delegation checklist that you can have. It's my gift to the listener. Go to paretotalent.com/delegate. And it's a breakdown of everything that I think everybody should be delegating pretty much all the time. I staff Latin American EAs. We actually train them internally. And so if you want to hire an EA, you can go to paretotalent.com. I don't staff for grunt work or boiler room work. So if somebody's like, oh, I want, they need to make 250 phone calls a day, or they need to do this data entry, those aren't the jobs that we're hiring for. But if you're looking for somebody like I just described, we can help with that too. And other than that, man, I super appreciate you having me on, Daniel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And everybody who's listening, go listen to his previous episode. He crushed it. And if you need to hire, Kasim's your guy. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening. Keep tuning in to hear more great insights from the coolest marketers from around the world. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and follow the Marketing Millennials podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, I would greatly appreciate you giving us a 5-star rating. It helps bring more marketers into our community.